Welcome back, Mesketeers, to another round of I Heart Mess, the premier location on YouTube for the best of the worst celebrity fashion. I'm Emily Kirkpatrick, a professional fashion critic with a discerning eye for the most offensive attire. Today I'll be showing you a panoply of bad outfits and even worse behavior from the month of October, including the very anti-woman fashion month we just had, a Victoria's Secret runway show recap, and the unceremonious return of King Kylie. As always, thank you to Ruth Ann Harnish for sponsoring this video and keeping this monthly assault on our eyeballs coming in full force. Okay, there's no use prolonging this mess any longer. First things first, the most important thing I learned all month is the name of Mary-Kate Olsen's 5 horses, which came to me courtesy of Caitlin Phillips' gift guide newsletter. For those wondering, the ponies are apparently called Bianca, Dunotere, Fatum, Fudamore, and Virginia. And this is precisely the celebrity intel I crave. These are the only types of details about famous people I actually care about, and no magazine is providing me with them. And now that these horses' names are public, I must ask, who will be the first to prove themselves to be the one true Olsen acolyte by getting them tattooed on their body? Now in Hollywood in October, there are two time-honored paparazzi traditions. The first being celebrities getting forced by whatever conglomerate owns them to attend that Universal Fright Night haunted house thing and take an obligatory photo with some of the costume actors. My personal favorite image in this category came from Olivia Rodrigo, as I feel like the combo of the Interscope baseball cap and her facial expression speaks volumes. But there's another autumnal activity that was troublingly absent this year, and that's D-listers getting paparazzied in a pumpkin patch. I first started thinking about the absence of this trope after seeing former Real Housewife Countess Luann toting a pumpkin casually upon her hip through the streets of Manhattan. An incredible sight that made me realize I'd seen absolutely no other famous person do the same all month. What has become of this once beloved seasonal starlet pastime, I wondered? Has the patch become passé? Did the farming season go poorly? In true recession fashion, have all the influencers gotten real jobs and thus no longer have the time to pose carefreely with squash for photographers they called on themselves? But thankfully, with mere days to spare before Halloween, one family with nothing but free time and a desperate need for good press stepped in to save the day. America's Duke and Duchess, Harry and Meghan. They provided us with not only the first, but the only pumpkin patch photo shoot of the season. I am still baffled as to how these two ex-royals were the only celebs who found their way to this classic seasonal agricultural activation, but thank God they did. It wouldn't truly be All Hallows Eve without at least one staged folksy image with gourds. According to all the runways, it's a particularly bad time to be a woman, especially a woman who wants to wear clothing. Following Paris Fashion Week, many critics wrote about the decidedly anti-woman sentiment out there on the catwalk. As Vanessa Friedman wrote in the New York Times, it was a Paris Fashion Week that introduced clothes that hid, confined, muzzled, or even erased the woman beneath. There were garments that transformed women into aliens and put them in aprons. There were styles that suggested suffering and entrapment were the cost of participation. These were looks that created an undercurrent of dystopia, despite the fact that most of the focus was on the rise of a new generation of designers. And absolutely, that is exactly what the designs this season are showing us. But also, reading that, I was just struck by the thought, is that not also always the undercurrent of the fashion industry at large? Suffering and entrapment are always very much the cost of participation, especially when we're talking about high fashion. This season just took that tacit reality and centered it in outfits that made that sentiment so overt it couldn't be ignored. The fat phobia, the racism, the ageism, the classism, the exploitation of children and laborers that exists from the beginning to the end of this manufacturing process. Fashion is always, first and foremost, about suffering and entrapment, whether that is ideological, financial, or physical. But here are just a handful of examples of the clothing from this fashion month that finally made that sentiment loud and clear for a lot of people. At Courrèges, women's faces were completely covered, which was intended as a statement about climate change and needing to increasingly protect oneself from the elements. But I can also see how it could come across as a statement about women being silenced and erased. At Margiela, there was almost the opposite problem, as models of all genders walked the runway with their mouths held open Clockwork Orange style in an homage to the brand's label. Miu Miu showed a number of very chic aprons, which many were quick to label as romanticizing the current tradwife aesthetic. However, it should be noted that the brand's creative director, Miusha Prada, has always been extremely interested in everyday work uniforms, and she explained after the show that the purpose of the inclusion of these aprons is that she was interested in exploring the real difficult life of women in history, from factories to the home. On the much sillier and inflammatory end of the spectrum, we got these armless Alaya rompers that suggested that what the modern woman really wants to look like is an earthworm. Who needs practical attire that gives them full use of their extremities when you're rich enough to just pay someone else to do everything for you while you're looking fabulous in your compression tube? But while I do think these ridiculous garments are just runway rage bait that will likely never actually be put into production, I absolutely do want to see a celebrity be forced to wear this on a red carpet. And finally, we got what I think is an incredibly uninspired troll of a collection from Duran Lantink for his debut at Jean Paul Gaultier. It felt like the designer was just throwing everything outrageous he could think of at the wall to see what would stick and go viral. But I had the same issues with this collection as I did with the one he showed earlier this year with those prosthetic chest pieces. It just doesn't seem like he has any larger concept or intention behind what he's making, which I think is especially dangerous and irresponsible when his work includes sex-swap genitalia, cartoonish exaggeration of breasts, and nude bodies used as punchlines. All designs that are great for memes but lacking in actual substance. But what really put Lantink on my shit list this month was what he told the New York Times after the show. He said, "I don't want to get political because it's a dangerous thing to do nowadays," as though fashion isn't always inherently political. And meanwhile, he sent one of the most overtly political collections we've seen all year down the runway without even realizing it. And just to round out the general women must suffer for fashion sentiment going on out there, we finished up the month with the newest addition to the Build-A-Body canon, Hailey Bieber in a custom Schiaparelli faux wood grain gown, complete with dramatic hip pads. A dress the model was unable to actually sit down in despite it specifically being designed for her to wear to a sit-down gala dinner. A beautiful sartorial coup de grace to this cursed fashion season. Of course, while many new creative directors' debuts were a total letdown, there's one designer who could never disappoint because no one is expecting anything from him at all. And that's Jaden Smith. Nothing but respect for my creative director and Nepo Baby Supreme. Clearly, he is delving into his role as the new creative director of Christian Louboutin headfirst, which explains why his face is totally covered in red paint. As always, Jaden is communicating far too loudly and transparently that he needs our attention, and thus I must deny him that satisfaction at every turn. But I am charmed by the untraditional way he's decided to wear this classic baseball cap, donning it as more of a fascinator balanced high atop his head. But my favorite part of this whole outfit has to be the belt, which features a buckle that is just the words Christian Louboutin fully spelt out in large serif font. There's something so funny to me about that graphic design choice. It feels very much like something a post-irony internet brand like Praying would do. While any form of logo mania feels very dated, Jaden might actually be onto something here. But whatever that thing is, between the arm warmers and his umpteenth pair of custom football shoulder pads, he lost it all over again. I wanted to quickly touch down on a smattering of the most pressing thoughts I had while watching the Victoria's Secret fashion show Pink Carpet earlier this month. The first being that I noticed guests were wearing a whole lot of sheer garments at this event, as God intended. However, they are almost universally lined with some sort of horrible modesty panel or pasty. And then finally, I saw Hannah Godwin had her chest fully out, and yet in half the pictures, she's covering her nipples modestly with her forearm. In which case, why go sheer and braless to begin with? But it did get me thinking, does Victoria's Secret have some secret anti-nipple rule? Because they never show them on the runway either, which feels insane for a lingerie brand in 2025. But perhaps they're complying with some weird Amazon or YouTube censorship rules? Perhaps they view the runway show as good old-fashioned Americana programming fun for the whole family. Whatever the reason, it's boring. Those who watched the live stream of this carpet with me know that I spent about half of it screaming at the cameramen to show me Ciara Miller's outfit up close. She was repeatedly shown in the background of other step and repeat interviews, but they never gave this wild outfit its time to shine. I think this dress is like a Pretty Little Thing knocked off Rihanna's padded Alaya matching set, but even so, I can never say no to a good hip bolster. Also, the bralette portion of this garment really couldn't fit any worse, but I am loving the way these puffy halter straps raise the line of the shoulder to the jaw, eliminating the neck entirely. More on that trend later. And the last outfit at this event I want to highlight comes to us courtesy of YouTuber Eva Gutowski, who is quickly proving herself to be a mess muse on the rise, wearing an ensemble that looks as though it was fashioned entirely out of plaster of Paris. To its credit, I think these micro chest cutouts are a fresh take on cleavage. Without additional physical context, seeing just a tiny squish of boob fat emerging out of this crop top makes the whole erogenous zone feel strange and new. And while the hip cutouts don't move me in quite the same way, I do think casually hooking your thumb into one of them is some brilliant masterclass modeling work. But the real star of the show here is obviously this floppy bucket hat that looks like a big old cabbage leaf that fell in a bucket of white paint. The final thing I must show you from the Victoria's Secret show is my absolute favorite photo of the night, this table full of hair extensions. It feels like the reality of this drag performance laid bare, an excellent reminder of just how much intense labor goes into the fabrication of these fictional glamazons for one night only. So little of what is consumed on the VS runway, or at any heavily documented event for that matter, has anything to do with reality, no matter how much the lights, cameras, angels might try to convince you otherwise. This site also immediately called to mind the last book we read for my lowbrow book club, Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom, in which she writes, "For many Black people, buying hair in the local beauty supply store is how we experienced immigration. Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese shopkeepers selling us colonized beauty from the heads of poor women in nations that the West has deliberately kept poor. We wear globalism on our heads." It seemed to me that you could not talk about a hair weave, really talk about it, if you were not also talking about supply chains, currencies, gender, and geopolitics. Now add to that the fact that these particular hair pieces are all being broadcast on Amazon, a company that is further devaluing the cost of those same international wefts of hair and collapsing supply chains while putting your local beauty supply store out of business entirely. Talk about a rich text. Now as for the Skims merkin, this is a topic everyone on Instagram has been begging me for my opinion on. And if you really must know my every waking thought on a plastic pubic hair wig, I had an hour-long conversation all about it, and it's currently up on my channel for members only. My Mess World podcast co-host Jessica DeFino and I sat down for a live-streamed conversation where we rehashed some of our thoughts on bad marketing, rage baiting, the beauty simulacrum, the hyper-real, body as trend, and the great pubescence. I hope you'll consider becoming a member to check that out today. The only other thing I have to share with you related to that faux bush thong is that I believe it gave us what might very well be the first ever appearance of the word merkin in a People magazine headline. And I know logically this has nothing to do with me, but it does fill me with a sense of massive personal accomplishment, because this is the true mess agenda. This is how I win. Corrupting one real legitimate fashion publication at a time by forcing them into talking about only the dumbest, trashiest trends. In recent videos, I've been extra mean to our foremost MAGA influencer, so I thought I would share some exceedingly rare fashion praise I have for precisely 3 outfits Kim shared on Instagram last month, even though she never actually ended up wearing them out of the house. Much to her detriment, in my opinion, because this is quite possibly the best she's looked in years. This rubberized gown is pretty standard Balenciaga fare, but I wanted to highlight it first for the padded out shoulders, which we'll be discussing in greater depth towards the end of this video, and secondly, because I think it wonderfully demonstrates a point I've highlighted in the past, which is that super uptight couture always looks radically cooler when paired with bare faces and messy hair. I previously highlighted this juxtaposition when Blake Lively wore a baseball cap and no glam with that Rococo Versace Lady Deadpool catsuit. There's something about the extreme undoneness paired with the extreme done-upness that I think makes it all feel very modern again. But of course, this would require Kim to embrace a little more sloppiness and a little more ugly, which is a non-starter, and why I think we see so many of her attempts at high fashion fail. Kim has also long been obsessed with a leg for shortening jumbo short, and with these leather culottes, I think she finally found a way to wear them that doesn't immediately make her petite frame look wildly disproportionate. I think something about the flesh tone of this turtleneck doesn't quite work. It either needs to be a more realistic second skin or a much deeper hue. But either way, the silhouette is exactly right. And again, the way her hair is haphazardly tucked into the neckline, the dark circles under her eyes, that's what makes it chic. There was also this brilliant all-over zebra print fit, which is made exceptional by the fact that we cannot see her face at all. Longtime Mesketeers know this is a theme I've been patiently waiting for Kim to revisit ever since her short-lived bondage mask era circa 2021. There's something so compelling to me about insisting upon one's own fame by stepping out in something that should render you unrecognizable and yet only makes your identity all the more obvious. And clearly Kim agrees, as she went on to follow my advice exactly, but we'll get to her obsession with me in just a second. First, I just need to mention this look that Kim wore to the Maison Margiela runway show. The choice of lucite footwear alone is obviously greatly displeasing to me, but I had to show you all this ensemble regardless because of the butt-on-butt action transpiring here. It is my bodies-on-bodies trend once again coming to life. I think Kim is a particularly interesting and universally recognizable body to be leveraging this concept. Although, obviously, I think it would have been much more compelling if it was a photo of her own butt atop her real butt, once again playing around with the concept of her own iconography. While most probably assume that me doling out advice to the Kardashians like this is the same as me spitting into the wind, I received copious evidence this month that the family is actually listening very closely to my fashion opinions. Between Kim suddenly starting to cover up her face again, wearing the Skims face compression garment a week after I told her to, and launching a merkin, something I've been begging celebrities to wear for 3 years now, it's becoming clearer by the day that this entire family is downright obsessed with me. Now, if they'd only pay me directly for these fabulous ideas, I could save us all a lot of time and hideousness. As I mentioned above, Kim has started obscuring her visage again, attending the 2025 Academy Museum Gala in a straight off the runway Margiela look, complete with headscarf. While I actually kind of like the Total Recall inspired quadruple breast illusion going on here, it also makes it look like Kim has the exoskeleton of an ant. And if we must do creepy flesh tones, why do the tones never actually match Kim's flesh? She is painting herself that skin color anyway. Why can't some coordination and customization take place to maximize the eeriness? I've been trying my best not to succumb to this QAnon conspiracy theory, but then something occurred that made me think I might have to go full Wagatha Christie in order to ferret out the Kardashian mole in our midst. And that is Kim suddenly wearing a trompe-l'oeil outfit painted directly onto her flesh. A concept I explicitly told her to do in a newsletter from August of last year. In order to not fully lose my mind over this, I'm just going to assume, as this editorial was styled by Jaleel Weaver, that he is likewise a big fan of the Claremont twins and their very nude stylings, and was just organically inspired to recreate their acrylic-based attire on his latest celebrity client. That, or this family is officially stalking me, and I'm going to have to take out the first ever cyber restraining order against them. Because it isn't just Kim who has subscribed to the cult of mess, but also Kylie, who in the midst of her new King Kylie collection rollout, shared a photo of herself wearing a suspiciously familiar outfit completely composed out of her own lip kits. Now, in August of this year, we got a similar sartorial concoction from Kesha while doing some e.l.f. Cosmetics SpawnCon, and I wrote about it at the time, saying that while the gimmick was good, the construction was bad, and I advised all beauty brands to create a far more wearable and movable textile out of these plastic tubes moving forward. Much as Kylie has done here. And if that's not enough to persuade you of my psychic influence, this bandeau is also the spitting image of a top I complimented at length in my newsletter in January, which was worn by an adult film actress at the XMA Awards, and was fabricated entirely out of iPod Nanos. Very interesting. Speaking of the return of King Kylie, if you want to know all of my in-depth opinions on this latest nostalgia cash grab, I wrote an essay on the subject for Slate that I would love for you to check out. But I'm also going to share just a couple of highlights from that cosmetics content deluge with you here, as they feel symbolically significant. If you were somehow so blessed as to miss this era of pop culture entirely, King Kylie was Kylie Jenner's teenage digital alter ego from 2016 when she first launched her lip kit inspired by her own artificially plumped pout, a time which I would argue was also the height of her cultural influence and relevance. So in that light, while this collection is being marketed as a 10-year anniversary celebration, to me, it also reads as a recession indicator, as the company is literally banking on your fondness for Kylie's teenage self to move product that is no longer moving like it did a decade ago. But I primarily wanted to bring this up not to delve into the finances of Kylie's cosmetics empire, but because in the first promotional images for this new makeup collection, we finally got a famous person demonstrating the correct application of glitter body paint. Well, almost. Could the hands and neck be more opaquely smeared? Absolutely. But the rest of the body is so thoroughly spackled, I must applaud it. Now, much like those monster platform flip-flops she photographed herself wearing last month, I have to say, go walk around outside like this, you coward. Show off your Edward Cullen hide to the world. This latest campaign is also immense validation of all of my theories on this family. As I've often pointed out, they are the masters of self-perpetuating their own iconography in a way that closely mimics authentic cultural impact. They're very good at generating nostalgia for a previous version of themselves. I think a perfect example of this is the now shuttered Kimoji Corporation, a business built on taking the most iconic moments from Kim's career as chosen by Kim, and animating them for her fans' dissemination, thus reifying these symbols' artificially constructed importance. To put it simply, as Peter Griffin would say,
it insists upon itself.
The last thing about this new meta PR tactic that I wanted to highlight is the trailer that accompanied it, which picks up where the 2016 promotional video left off. This is funny to me because in an alternate timeline, I feel like this would have been Kylie's Kendall giving the cops a Pepsi moment. Instead, nobody cares. In the intervening decade, thanks to this family, the president, and social media in general, we have all been outrage baited to the max. We can be baited no more. What is a little sexy prisoner cosplay from a world-famous billionaire in the face of the rise of genuine fascism and a government full of pedophiles, you know? Even so, it is obviously still a wildly tone-deaf commercial, which I suppose also aptly mirrors our current post-woke American culture nicely. Perhaps this is Kylie's way of following in her big sister's footsteps and soft-launching her own MAGA-lite rebrand. It's certainly working out beautifully for Sydney Sweeney. This month, we got a friendly reminder that the big shapes trend that kicked off this year still persists, although it is perhaps shifting into a new dimension for the year to come. For starters, I do not know why Claire Foy decided to wear this very boxy, very hunchbacked, ashy studio haute couture mini dress, but boy am I glad that she did. Testament to the fact that there are still so many distended dimensions left for dresses to take on and globular ways for women to take up space. We've barely scratched the surface on this front. Also, kind of a genius way to promote your new film by becoming a one-woman portable movie screen for on-the-go projection. At Vogue World at the end of the month, I thought Alex Earle looked shockingly chic in this Saint Laurent mini dress. But what particularly struck me about it was this giant oval applique completely obscuring her torso. As I've been thinking for a minute now that all of the geometric gown shapes we've been seeing out there this year might give way to something more two-dimensional, and this feels like a perfect example of that. And in further 2D updates, Niecy Nash's dominatrix flapjack fascinator is perhaps the only good thing to come out of this atrocious All's Fair press tour. Another gorgeous, very flat geometric shape jutting out of the body. I do wish the wire along the edge of this cowhide pizza crust wasn't quite so prominently visible through the thin leather, but even so, it's still quite a captivating chapeau. And the lumps and bumps didn't end there. This month we also saw a handful of examples of a trend that I foresee only growing stronger in the year to come, and that's padded out bodies. Emily Ratajkowski and Jodie Turner-Smith both opted for garments with some dramatic upholstered protrusions from Duran Lanting's Spring 2026 collection for Jean Paul Gaultier. Ratajkowski's gown featured a sort of plush wing that made the model look like she had shark fins growing out of her shoulders. Jodie opted for something a little more lascivious from the designer, wearing a jumpsuit from the collection with ponderous ovaloid breasts that jutted out a foot in front of her to give a sort of Jessica Rabbit meets Addison Rae at the 2024 VMAs silhouette. And back at Vogue World, Hailey Bieber also wore a plush Mugler cocktail dress that instantly reminded me of Emrata's. This new look is sort of like the bumper car bolsters we saw on Meg Thee Stallion and Shanina Shake earlier this year, but applied more evenly across the body, like a onesie made of foam or one of those inflatable sumo wrestler costumes. As an extension of this look, I think we're also seeing a hell of a lot of weird stuff going on with shoulders out there that will only continue into next year. They've been coming down the red carpet in all shapes and sizes this month, bumpy, sloped, triangular, and full-on batwing. I do miss the true crone shoulders of yore, but there are a lot of interesting new alternatives to choose from. I'm especially taken with Cynthia's roided out traps in this blazer that renders her necklace, the spiritual sibling to Ciara's puffed up halter top, and anything that makes the body take up double the width it should, like Sophie Turner's vast Louis Vuitton wingspan, is a-okay in my book. It also feels like an avian riff on the Stretch Armstrong fits we've been talking about the last couple of months. Speaking of halter tops, one of my favorite looks of the month had to be Alexander Skarsgård in this custom Ludovic de Saint-Sernin ensemble. Timothy wishes. While I don't always agree with his outfits, I've loved seeing the way Alex has been playing with fashion and incorporating elements of kink in promotion of his kinky new string of films. I think the Office Siren dress shirt is a fantastic choice for him, and I love that the leather tie corresponds to the lace-up leather pants. If I had to give a note, it's that the diagonal lines on the shirt could have been taken in just an inch or so on either side so as to leave even more chest sluttily exposed and thus create the illusion of an even broader shoulder for everyone's viewing pleasure. I also would have liked to see a touch more spandex in the composition of the shirting material to maximize the figure-hugging cling. But regardless, overall, a powerful opening gambit into a new era of tardy menswear. In further daringly transgressive fashions, a friend sent me this image of Irene Sophia Lucio wearing a cast of her own bust to the opening night of her play Liberation, in which she performs completely in the nude, and I am obsessed. Apparently in the show, her character says that her favorite physical feature is her tits, and so Irene decided to use this opportunity to show them off. The top is made by Misha Japanwala, who specializes in these types of metal breastplates, and also made the silver one Lupita Nyong'o wore to the 2023 Tony Awards. Irene told Playbill of this decision to wear this boob armor to the premiere. I get to commemorate this moment and my body in this moment in time. I will look back at this piece hanging up on my wall and say, damn, I did that. Of course, Tom Ford first ushered this concept into the zeitgeist with his Spring 2020 collection, promptly creating a number of custom Jeff Koons-esque metallic metal tops for celebs like Zendaya and Gwyneth Paltrow. But Irene's top addresses one of the major complaints I had with Ford's version at the time, which is that it was only ever shown on small-breasted women, with Desiree Busnelli being the one extremely notable exception to that rule, a photograph of whom remains one of my favorite editorial images. I love that there's nothing stylized about Irene's chest plate. It just shows what real large breasts look like, which I think makes it both more confronting and an infinitely more compelling piece of clothing. Longtime viewers know I've been a staunch supporter of a little trend I've been calling clown couture since the very beginning, and now it seems the look may have finally reached the masses. Jonathan Anderson has become known for incorporating these loops of fabric as a detail in a lot of his work, first at his eponymous label, then again at Loewe. One of his debut Dior pieces was a dress for Anya Taylor-Joy featuring heaps of this same detailing. And most recently, Natalie Portman wore a Dior sweatshirt with a fully ruffled neckline. I saw this top and immediately thought Natalie looked like a mime for our Instagram minimalist culture. She's a low-key jester who moonlights as a telemarketer. We live in an era so depressing, even our clowns have been robbed of their joy. But this top also got me thinking, why stop the rough here? I want full, stiff Elizabethan realness. I want heads served up on a sharply creased linen platter. Hell, I think even a dog e-collar could be a pretty fabulous statement piece. And I'll leave you today with this final vague musing, elaborating on a remark I made in the Halloween video. Justin Bieber shared this image of his son Jack Blues in a low-key combo that I can only describe as aspirationally swaggy. And between this and Jack's perfect mini-me Halloween costume, Justin is currently raising the one true threat to his street-style throne. Okay, that's been Mess for the month of October. If you're loving all the terrible things I've been putting down here month after month, you're going to want to go ahead and subscribe to the channel, grab a membership, and spread the gospel of mess far and wide. Thanks as always to my sponsor, Ruth Ann Harnish, for putting the class in Day Class A. After everything you've seen here today, if you really want to punish yourself even further, you can always sign up for my weekly Substack newsletter at iheartmess.com. The link will be in the caption below. I've also started posting my podcast Mess World to YouTube, so please check that out as well when you have a chance. I'll see you turkeys again real soon. Bye.